Today we're going to talk about embossing folders. Embossing folders, I love them, they are super cool. They give you instant dimension, which is incredibly cool to use on your craft project. But there are more ways that you can use your embossing folders. And I have a really super cool one to stretch your embossing folders even more, so let's check it out. As this is an embossing folder technique, obviously you will need some embossing folders. I'm going to use my 3D ones, but you can check your stash for any ones you may have lying around. And the next thing you're going to need is foam. And for this, the cheap kind, so the sort of crappy foam works best. And you can use all your hideous colors for this as well. And now for the technique. I have my embossing folder and I have a piece of foam that's slightly smaller than my embossing folder. I line it up at the top, leaving a little part open or free, so the embossing folder can still close. You have to keep in mind that foam is a bit thicker than paper, so you can still close your embossing folder properly. And then just make the right sandwich for your die cutting machine and run it through the machine. And this is what you get, a really cool impression of the textured pattern of the embossing folder. And because I use the cheaper, a bit more crappy foam, it will stay this way and it will not bounce back sort of, which would happen if you were to use the more dense and also a bit more expensive foam. Now make sure to check your own machine on how to make the right sandwich for using embossing folders. I'm using my Big Shot switch because I've gone electric and it doesn't make any difference if you add your embossing folder straight on the platform or at an angle. I tested both, and both adding the embossing folder straight or at an angle will give you about the same impression. And as you can see, I have been testing quite a lot and this is what I found. All the embossing folders with some deeper imprints or some deeper patterns will give you the best results. As you can see, all the patterns of these embossing folders show really well on the foam. I did some testing with this floral embossing folder, and bigger isn't always better, especially not with this technique. I've done some tests with a piece of foam that's bigger than my embossing folder, and when you run it through the machine it will add pressure on the middle part, squishing that foam in the middle where the pattern of the embossing folder is. But the outside bits that are around the embossing folder will stay the same, so you get a totally warped piece of foam, which is, well, very practically unusable, so that's not a very good idea. Now, this technique is also great to use smaller pieces of foam because it's a great way to use up some strips. And this means that the leftover bits that you cut off, you can also use them, which is always great. And here you can also see the difference between crappy foam and super crappy foam, because the blue one is a bit thinner, which will give you even more texture and the pattern will pop up even better on the blue one than on the green one. But it also varies or differs which embossing folder or which pattern that you are using. And before you know it, you have a pile of textured foam, which is incredibly cool, but now what? So let's just check out some ways to use it. First, let's try the textured foam with some ink. I have Distress Oxide ink, but you can use any ink you have. You can pat it on or just swipe it on straight with the pad. Swipe it in different directions, so you ink it up well or ink it up partially. You can do it however you want it. Add a bit less ink for a more grungy look or some more ink for a cleaner look. And then just add your foam to a card or use it in your art journal or anywhere else where you need some texture, and then just press it on with your hands, making sure to rub over it and then lift it to see what it looks like. And this gives a really pretty cool result. Now there's still some ink on my foam, so I'm going to use a few more colors, and I'm just spreading them around in the same way, so swiping them on a bit. By the way, if your Oxide ink pad is a little bit contaminated with a darker color, you can swipe it right off with a piece of cloth or a kitchen paper. And now I do the same. I add my foam to the card, and I'm going to use a brayer to add a bit more pressure. And this will give you a bit of a different look. It's almost psychedelic, if that's the right way to describe it. It's a little bit more plushy or fluffy, or what's a good word for it. And of course you can do it the other way around too. Just leave your foam where it is and then add a card on top and use a brayer or use your hands to rub it on. And that will give you a bit of a cleaner result. And of course you can use them with a gel plate as well, because your textured embossed foam makes some really cool printing plates as well. Add a bit of paint on a gel plate. I'm using a small one, but you can use a big one as well. Then use your brayer to spread it out. Add your foam on top and press it down, and then take it off. And then you can make a print with a gel plate on the card, and then just peel off the gel plate. And this will give you some really pretty texture already. But you can also use the foam piece for the other side of the pattern. So this way you will get both sides of the pattern, which is super cool of course. And you can also use your piece of foam to make partial prints. So just press it around that first circle and press it on part of the card, or do it the other way around, press your card on the foam. And this will give you some really cool texture as well from the inside and the outside of the pattern. And I've been fiddling around a little bit more on another card, making a print on the foam again. And now I'm just using it as sort of a freehand stamp, just adding some pattern with the same color on top of the previous pattern. Around that first circle print I took from the gel plate, and now I'm adding the pattern with the paint that's still on the foam around that circle. And here are those backgrounds I have been playing with. And if you have a gel plate, it's also a really cool way to spread your paint and then add it to your foam. And this way you will have a bit more control on how much paint you're adding to your foam, instead of adding just big blobs. And maybe you don't have a gel plate, no sweat, because you can just do the same, because you can just ink up your piece of foam and then add it on another piece of foam. Use a brayer to add some pressure and then make a print from the second piece of foam. And this will give you the mirror image of your embossed foam. And here's another quick idea. You can make a background with just one color, or you just ink up the middle and then add a second color around it, and then add a third color around that color, and then make a print on your card. And this way you will get a multicolor print, and leave the outside open a bit just to add some coolness, if that's a word. And this will give you a pretty multicolor background that is fading towards the outside. I hope you like this way to use your embossing folders, and that you're ready to dig up that cheap and crappy foam in those hideous colors and turn them into really cool art-based pieces that you can use on your projects in various ways. So have lots of fun with that. And in case you need some more embossing folder inspiration, I have some right here for you. And as always, make sure to keep on crafting.